So this is going to be a general overview of what generations look like and how we can apply that to transportation and housing planning. So in America, some would say there are 5 or 6. I've grouped one generation, the greatest generation, into one. So there are 5 living generations that we have. The greatest generation is divided into the GI generation and the silent generation. We have baby boomers, Generation X, Generation Y, which is also called Millennials. I'll be referring to them as Millennials, and Generation Z. The greatest generation, which is the GI generation and the silent generation, these are the children of World War I, or they were the fighters of World War I, Korean and Vietnam Wars. So they saved the world and then they started building a nation. They are assertive and energetic doers and excellent team players, strongly interested in personal morality and standards of right and wrong. They're community-minded, marriage is for life, strong loyalty to jobs. The labor union was spawned from this generation. They avoid debt, so they save and they buy with cash. And they also were the first hopeful drumbeats of the civil rights movement. So they're avid readers, especially with newspapers, and retirement means, just sitting back, relaxing, enjoying their days. So they're disciplined, self-sacrificing, and cautious. Baby boomers were born 1946 to 1964. Now all these groups, there's some overlap, and they're all very diverse. So you might fit into one of these groups, but baby boomers were born 46 to 64. There are 2 subsets of this group, those revolutionaries of the 60s and 70s, and then the party-hardy career climbers, those yuppies of the 70s and 80s. So they ushered in the free love and societal nonviolent protests, and they buy it now and use credit. Too busy for neighborly involvement, yet strong desires to reset or change the common values of the good of all. In this generation, women began working outside of the home in record numbers. So this shifted what families look like. Divorce became prevalent in this generation. It's an optimistic, driven, and team-oriented generation. The baby boomers are one of the largest generations in our country today. And they are the first generation to use the word retirement to mean being able to enjoy their life. And as Jeremy just said, enjoying life often means being around family. Generation X, those born in 1965 to 1980. These were the latchkey kids. They grew up street smart but isolated. A lot of their parents worked, so they were a little more on their own. They often had divorced or career-driven parents. They're very entrepreneurial and individualistic. Government and big business means very little to them. They want to save the neighborhood, not the world, and they often feel misunderstood as a generation. This generation averages about 7 career changes in their lifetime. So it's normal for them not to work at a job throughout their whole lifetime. When we have the previous generation, they would get a job and stay there their whole life. They're late to marry. They're very deep in debt, credit card debt, and short on loyalty and wary of commitment. They're cautious, skeptical, unimpressed with authority, and self-reliant. I am one of these generations. Some of you probably are too. Next are Generation Y or Millennials. These were the people born in 1981 to 2000. They are nurtured by omnipresent parents, optimistic and focused. So they schedule everything and feel enormous academic pressure. And they're very digitally limited, or not limited, literate. So this generation, they grew up going to school with computers. And so they learn differently. They envision the world as a 24/7 place. They want fast and immediate processing. They have been told over and over again that they are special And so they expect the world to treat them this way. They do not live to work. They prefer to have more relaxed work environments, and they will often move to a place because they like the place, not for the jobs. Millennials are actually the second largest, or in competition with the baby boomers, of population. So we've got baby boomers and millennials, which are shaping our communities. Finally, we have Generation Z, so those children born after 2001. 61% of children in this age bracket have televisions in their room, 35% have video games with them at all times, and 14% have a DVD player. Actually, DVD players are probably going out the window too. 4 million have their own cell phones too, so they're constantly connected. And with the advent of computers and web-based learning, children are starting to leave the play, and because they're so focused on computers, so they're losing the art of play because of that. So there's some stereotypes that we have about the different generations. For those in the silent generation, they have greatly reduced physical and mental capabilities, so they really shouldn't be driving, right? Yeah, it's a stereotype that we give them. Baby boomers, they're totally out of sync with technology. I see some baby boomers using your tablets. Totally a stereotype. Generation Xers are negative cynics. This might be a stereotype. It actually might be true. And millennials are unmotivated. They live in their parents' basements and travel by bus because they just can't afford it. Can't afford a car. So we're going to debunk some of these stereotypes. So there was a survey done by the Community and Transportation Preferences Survey by the National Association of Realtors and Portland State University. They sampled 3,000 adults covering 50 of the largest metro areas and found that 83% of the silent generation, or the greatest generation, they do like driving. In comparison, millennials also like driving, but they just like it less than other groups. Generation X and the millennials like bicycling, and will use that for transportation. And millennials use transit more than other groups. All groups liked walking. So in general, all of our generations like to walk, but Generation X and the millennials, they would actually use walking for transportation. So it's not just exercise, it would also be for transportation. And millennials are really interested in living near public transportation. Also, millennials, they want those bike ped lanes. So since World War II, there was a steady increase in how people their transportation trends until the turn of the century. So around 2000, the number of miles driven annually on American roads steadily increased. By 2001, though, it started to see a decline. So there was 6% less miles driven by 2004. So we see in 2001, there was 10,300 miles traveled, and then by 2009, it had gone down to 7,900 miles traveled. The trend is to drive less. To drive less is driven by our millennials and Generation X. 2000 to 2001 vehicle miles traveled by the younger generations, it decreased. So why are millennials driving less? It's a number of reasons that they are driving less. Higher gas prices has caused that. There's also been new licensing laws that have caused millennials to wait longer to even get their driver's license. Technology to support alternative transportation, so we see Uber starting to become a thing. It's easier to catch a ride, so you don't have to have those expenses of your own vehicle. And changes in values and preferences. They have a different mindset than that of their parents. So Millennials and Generation X are really what are the people that are leading the trends toward alternative modes of transportation. Baby boomers do continue to use their cars, but as they grow and into a different phase in life, retirement, and are continuing to age, they might start looking at transportation needs. They're gonna shift. Also, with the state of the economy and gas prices, that might change how they travel as well. When it comes to housing, millennials are not buying houses, and they do this both culturally and for cultural and economic reasons. The housing market can look scary to them, especially coming out of college with a load of student loan debt, so to get in any more debt. So they've spent less, saved more, and in some cases they have moved back in with their parents. They've also delayed marriage by 6 years of what is average. And they like millennials, they're seeing a surge of millennials moving into the central business districts of communities, especially of the larger communities. Also, the millennials are starting to compete for homes with their parents. Those baby boomers are retiring and downsizing. Also, there's an upsurge in divorce rates with the baby boomers, and so with that, they're selling homes and moving into smaller communities. And they're actually seeing a lot of baby boomers moving into the core of the city as well. As millennials begin to marry and have families, the question is, will they be moving out to the suburbs, and what will those suburbs need to look like? What will the smaller communities need to look like for to fulfill the needs and desires of the millennials? Millennials choose where to live based on public transportation nearby, walkability to parks and restaurants and shopping, short commutes, as well as good schools. So here are some questions that I think as the board and planning for the future in our communities in regards to transportation that we should look at. How can we keep the younger generations in our cities? Jeremy said that the Generation Y, the millennials, has flatlined. So thinking about how to keep this younger generation into our cities is a key question we need to ask ourselves. For Generation Xers, will denser development patterns and schools improve in the urban core, lead to continued declines? I mean, what do the Generation Xers need? They've got kids. Do we need better schools within the urban core to keep our Generation X families there? Baby boomers, as they get older, will they want to look towards alternative modes of transportation, transitioning from cars? Baby boomers and millennials make up the largest generations, and they're both moving in the same direction when it comes to public transportation. So how does this impact our transportation planning? What are the generations' transportation needs as they age? And how can community leadership, in the absence of accessible and affordable travel options, help our greatest generation as they live out this next season, final season of their lives? So I think I just put that one up there twice. There we go. Oh. So that's just a quick overview of things that we can think about. I know Phil's intent with having these trends is to think beyond where we are now. And we have put a lot of investment into roads and highways, but are the trends leading us in that same direction? Do we need to look differently? How do we keep the people in our communities and give them a community that they really want to live in? So as leaders, we have to closely monitor in this region the commuting demands, the transportation patterns, and the housing needs to begin really answering these questions that we just went over. So thank you.